I mean, just to start this officially, I was like, wait a minute. Most of the people that have seen the movie obviously have never seen any kind of interview with you, and you're the original director for the whole thing. So it was just like, it's actually really cool to chat because since the movie's about to finally come out on, uh, does everyone call it DSTV? We were messaging last night, so everyone in South Africa just knows what DSTV is.
Yeah, that's right. DSTV is the cable version, and then there's a streaming platform called Showmax, and they both belong to a holding company which is called MultiChoice. And MultiChoice is one of the biggest media companies in the world. It's pretty big. It is South African, but yeah, it's a significantly big company. But yeah, the version we're talking about is just referred to as DSTV.
Okay, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks for having me. And I thought also this may be a good idea because yeah, I'm heading back into the rural areas, and I'll be offline again. And yeah, it'll be nice to chat a bit about maybe where the movie originated, where the documentary, the idea came from, and then where it is at now, and so on. And just before I continue any further, I just want to give a huge thanks and shout out not only to you but also to Frankie for bringing things this far.
Oh yeah.
Without her, this wouldn't have been possible, and without you, this wouldn't have been possible. And there was, of course, a few other people who contributed, but I just want to put that out there. And then, yeah, of course, like the editing, I did a bit of editing on some of the clips for social media and so on. And man, I have to take my hat off to you. It's not an easy job. So a lot of respect. It certainly is definitely harder than what I think people realize. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for all the energy and making this thing, see the day of light, because I think it's a very important story that needs to be told.
Yeah, thanks. It was, I mean, definitely that's a good place to start though, because it started with you, with your original idea, which I still haven't even talked to you about because from you I just inherited this hard drive shipped all the way from South Africa, but absolutely it was Frankie that was just like, I need to make this movie and this has got to happen. And so without Frankie, I never would have even heard about it. But yeah, I think that oh shit, I lost my train of thought. Um, oh yeah, I was gonna say just it is I think because of the subject matter, it was definitely the hardest movie I've ever made. I've made movies or I've worked on movies about deforestation primarily and just sort of conservation in general, but working on a movie where you're, for like 50 to 60 hours a week for 5 months, where every day you're looking at this footage of sharks and nets, a shark on the drum line, and you're just thinking, you always have to ask yourself, why is this movie being made? What's the message? And then I realized like the whole time what I'm editing and working on, and literally I would have all the transcripts from, like 18 different people you interviewed, right? And I'd have all the transcripts of pages scattered all around the floor. And sometimes I would just lay in the middle of them and just stare at the ceiling, and it would be so overwhelming because I would just be like, the story subject matter is it's a story about humans being so afraid of sharks that they're willing to kill them all. And to me, that idea was just so different than deforestation, where it's just a story of corporate greed. You know, this story is so unique. We're going to kill all the sharks because we're afraid of them. It's just absolutely mind blowing to me that that story even exists. It was depressing. It was a very, very depressing movie to make. Even though I don't feel like the final product is depressing, it was hard. It took a pretty big toll on me. Like I still don't even like to turn on my computer that I edited on. It was exhausting. So
Yeah.
yeah. Because I think the hardest part was how do I make it an uplifting story? You know? and that was challenging. So
Yeah, it's very, very hard to find a good medium, and I don't think you truly know when you're busy editing it, what it's going to turn out like necessarily, or what would be the ideal way for it to turn out to reach your objective. But yeah, you're right. This is a very important story that needs to be told. It's a very unnecessary system that's still in place, and I think we talked about it earlier via WhatsApp. You were talking about some skepticism amongst the academics, which is an area I'm very, very familiar with, by the way, and I'm very familiar with the academics in this area and how they think and so on. Um,
can
and
I
yeah,
just can I just interject? Yeah, what happened is I was telling you just so the audience can know what happened is I was getting a lot of rejections from places to screen the movie because they were like, your movie isn't based on science fact. And why didn't you make a movie about overfishing? That's a much bigger issue. And I was just like, okay, guys, like it's a SharkNet movie. That's why I'm not talking just about overfishing. But yeah,
mm,
sorry, go ahead.
exactly. And and look, we're, I don't know how you label yourself, but I would see myself also as an activist. And my career is about taking action that has a very specific outcome in mind. So while I do devour science and I love reading up, since I was a kid, I loved studying about, especially biology and ecology. I love figuring out how the natural world works and ticks. For me, ultimately, there are a few pressing issues, and we need to, action is needed in order to solve those issues. So I think some academic minds want to have their information packaged in a stereotypically scientific way in order for them to feel that the product is of a sufficient nature or quality. But for us, yeah, we knew all the variables that contribute to the failure of shark conservation. Um, Number one, Homo sapien impact. The impact of Homo sapiens, whether it's rhino, whether it's Totoaba, whether it's white sharks, whether it's forests, we all know it's Homo sapien driven. The crisis that we're in. It's called the Anthropocene, in fact. So
Mhm.
this mass extinction is thanks to us. Okay, so we knew when we set out, in fact, to make this documentary, we looked at everything, all the contributing factors. There were orcas. The orcas do play a role. Okay, everybody knows that. All the scientists know that. The difference between orcas and human impact on sharks is that orcas are a natural enemy to sharks
Mm.
or life in the ocean. They are
Mhm.
supposed to be there, and even their numbers are severely impacted. So the impact that they have on sharks is less than it would have been pre pre this mass extinction that we are in the middle of.
Mhm.
So we can't blame the orcas for the declining shark populations. However, they do play a role, and they do play a role in Gans Bay. Now, we could have also looked at overfishing. In fact, initially we did set out to look at overfishing, and we do blame overfishing for a lot of the woes. But in my mind, it would be no good blaming the orcas. It would be no good blaming overfishing. Um, because as much of an impact as these things have, how are we going to fix overfishing in South Africa at the moment? In Africa, we're
Right.
struggling worldwide. Even the best, most modern countries in Europe are struggling with the problem of overfishing. In fact,
Mm.
some people are saying we can never fish sustainably because of A, B, C, D. Now, I
Right.
know those variables, I know those theories as to why overfishing is only a theoretical possibility, but not in reality an actual feasible outcome. But we wanted, once we started going on this journey, we discovered the shark nets. And when we zoomed in on the shark nets, we saw that, wow, this is not only an archaic system, we saw that it was fascinating history. So we made the choice. We wanted to focus in and zoom on the shark nets. So that became our primary focus and our concern. And for several reasons. One, is something we can fix. Two, it's something we should fix. Three, it does affect the populations of not only sharks, but several other
Yes.
species out there. And
Absolutely.
then four, it's a culling system. It's a system of systematic culling, and it has been. And look, now the deceiving thing is the Sharks Board will tell you, well, it's not such a big system. Here are the numbers. We're only catching this many sharks. But the truth be told, initially, when shark populations numbers were much healthier and the shark nets were even more destructive, they did
Right.
massive amounts of damage. So the populations have declined severely. The nets, the number of nets have gone down, but that doesn't make it okay because it's still wrong. It shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Sharks is a human perception problem. It's not an actual real threat to human life. South Africa is an incredibly dangerous country if you measure it by European standards. Okay. Sharks in the bigger picture is simply negligible in terms of the damage they do to human societies. You're looking at way more people that are drowning simply by going into bodies of water than you're looking at sharks, even during the peak times of destruction, Black
Yeah.
December.
Right.
The damage done to human population by sharks are absolutely negligible. It doesn't even make any sense to waste any energy on it. There are much bigger problems that we can be focusing on, and we can use these budgets way more productively. And the last thing I want to add is crime in South Africa has a very bad reputation worldwide. Google most dangerous cities in the world and see how South Africa fluctuates over a period of 5 years. Top 10, maybe slightly slipping out of top 10 the next year, then back in the top 10, 1, 2, 3, 4 of our major cities. So that is a really bad image that floats around about South Africa in the international world. Tourism for us is massively important. Surely we should be doing something about that as opposed to this other threat that is negligible in terms of the damage that it does. Sharks are a perception problem for humans. It's not an actual life and death problem for humans. It's all in the mind. It's a perception thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wild. I think I think well maybe I'm beating down on this too much, but I'm still thinking well, I'm thinking about two things. Number one, the timing of the article that everyone is referencing right now is the article that was put up by the Sharks Board right before the movie started showing. And Frankie and I were just like, what are the chances that this article is coming out right now? Because they hadn't put out like a big paper in a while, as far as we could tell. And then all of a sudden, here's this article that basically would be the opposite of what the movie was about to say. And we thought that was really fascinating. But this, I think, is every place that's rejected the movie, this is the article they've referenced. Like this article just went around, their article just went around the globe. It was picked up by major papers everywhere. Um, like we even had aquariums in different places, really large aquariums that originally wanted to see the movie, and they're like, "Oh, we're so excited about this movie." And then as soon as they saw the movie, then they came back and they're like, "Ah, we're sorry, we can't show it. It's not based on science fact." But I do appreciate what you're saying. Scientists do want, like if they're going to write a paper, they're thinking of the movie like a paper. And they're like, it has to include everything to be factual. And one of the things that I said to them, to this, I won't mention the name of one of the places I reached to, but it was reached out to, it was university. And this university was very excited about the movie. And then they came back and said, we can't show it because of this and that and the other. And I kind of centered on what you said. This is an anthropogenic threat. This is something where people are specifically trying to capture sharks. Even the commercial fishermen aren't specifically saying we're just going to capture great whites today, right? But the shark nets do. And so my question is I said, okay, so you're saying overfishing is the more important issue, and therefore you're not going to show the movie. And they're like, yes, that's the fact. And I said, okay, so what I would like you to imagine is if you and I are having this conversation standing on the beach at Hansby. I'm sorry, not Hansby. If you were standing on the beach, like we're a SharkNet beach, and we took an entire year's worth of bycatch from the nets and we stack it on the sand around us, right? So hundreds and hundreds of creatures just stacked up. And I said, now, do you want to talk about overfishing in that moment as the larger issue? And I think when you're
Exactly.
faced with that idea and that visual, that's the whole point, is like, this is something we can do something about. And the craziest thing to me was is they wouldn't show the movie because they said it wouldn't be great for conservation. And then, like the same week that they weren't going to show our movie, they showed Jaws instead. And then they had
Now, Charlie, explain this to me. Okay.
yeah,
The white shark is protected in South Africa by law.
I mean, supposedly, yes.
Yes, protected, right?
Yeah,
So a fisherman goes out, he targets, he says he didn't. The judge differed with him, and it was claimed that he targeted a white shark, so he was fined 100,000 rands in cash for that offense. This is just a normal fisherman.
yeah,
So that's the equivalent of about 100,000 pesos. Okay, for Americans, that's not a lot. For Africans, that is a hell of a lot of money. Okay, you can do a lot. You can buy a lot with 100,000 rand.
mm,
That was a hefty penalty. So this animal enjoys protection. So why, on the flip side of that, is the state allowed to target specifically this animal and kill
yeah,
it? Okay, they're using nets that are catching untargeted animals. On top of that,
yes,
also some of them protected. So it's a poor system, but they're targeting the very animal that they're penalizing the normal public fishing for with up to 100,000. That is a massive penalty. That kind of penalty does not get dished out easily. I can tell you that much in this
yeah,
society. So there's a hypocrisy. There's a hypocrisy there that boggles the mind.
yeah.
Now, if the sharks,
Actually,
if
before you move on, I just wanted to say that that is one of the things Frankie and I talked about doing in the final edit. Is we definitely had talks where we were just like, what if we calculated the fine that would be owed by the government if they could be fined for killing great white sharks since 1991? Pretty sure I have that right. When the Protection Act went in, I mean, the fine just would be like so huge. I thought that would be fascinating. We ended up not doing that, but yeah, that is an idea that we had, and I'm really glad you brought
yeah.
that up.
Now the thing is, again, and you would know this better than anyone else. You also directed this movie. You guys referred to
Co-directed.
it as co-directing. I
Yeah,
know, but
yeah,
you would know this from your career and from your experience. You have to focus because you're only an hour and 20 minutes is long.
that's a
You
long
probably want
movie.
That's a very long movie. You can only go into so many details. I mean, we had hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And you know that better than anyone else, of footage that had to be
Bob,
concentrated
just
into a
interviews,
footage.
just I'm really glad you said that. Like just interviews alone, just interviews, not all the B-roll. There was probably 30 hours of interviews
There we go.
that I had to knock down. I mean, yeah, it was insane.
Yeah, and you know what? There was more stuff. We did a study with a university where we tried to sample meat,
Oh yeah,
to
I
screen for
forgot.
shark meat and so on, but the lab made some kind of mistake, and at that point, I left the country, so I couldn't steer that project anymore. But there was a whole lot of extra stuff that could have
Yeah,
gone into the documentary. So you had to make a call, and like, yeah, overfishing, that was not our thing. That was not what we wanted to address. And my thoughts on this is the same as with the vegan thought, view, the world view, is that um, fishing sustains people, especially in the poor parts of the world.
mm,
We can't very quickly, without a lot of energy, fix or solve that problem. Okay,
yeah,
that is somebody else's problem. For us, we wanted to look at something that within our lifetime we could impact, we could change, something that should be changed, and something that was morally incorrect and wrong, and that ended up being
yeah.
the struggle.
Yeah, definitely. And that is something I said to this particular location too, is I was just like, good Lord. I mean, if I included all the overfishing and the finning and everything, it would have been a 4 hour long movie that nobody would have watched. Because a lot of people don't even know what overfishing is. They don't know what you mean when you say commercial fisher or trawler. That's 20 minutes of explanation to fill that out. So it's just practicality, but I like what you're saying. Like the whole point is it's like how crazy is it that the country that makes it illegal to capture and kill great whites also has marine protected areas with shark nets in marine protected areas. That should not exist. Those should not coexist anymore. It should be a marine protected area for great whites and all the other creatures that live there with no nets. I mean, it's just really simple. So yeah. Now that's interesting. But let's go back though, if you don't mind. When did you know you were going to make a movie? Yeah,
Yeah,
so
so I came back from Sea Shepherd, and yeah, it was a very, very hard time for me to adjust, because I'd spent more than 4 years living out of backpacks and living super light, and kind of engulfed in this extreme kind of like conservation or even activism, because yeah, it's very hard to explain to somebody who hasn't, um, lived that kind of lifestyle. But you're, even now when I'm in the bush, you're separated from normal society for long, long periods. With Sea Shepherd, we were like-minded crew. We're obsessed with conservation and living more green. Um, Almost convincing ourselves that we could save the natural world if we really tried hard enough. We would recycle everything. We would talk about international travel by sailboat instead of flying. We never bought each other gifts. We would make everything from
mm,
objects on the boat and so on. So I came back from that into normal society after about 3 years or so. I think I was away about three Christmases when I came back for the first time, and I came back, and it was just strange being in normal society. So I was like adjusting and adapting back to normal day-to-day life, and also, when I was in Mexico, I would do these extreme nature adventures. I would stay in the desert, see if I can survive for like a month. I would really test myself, in the desert. And so now I'm coming back, and now I'm in this squeaky clean, everything's perfectly ordered, kind of civilization lifestyle again. and nobody is obsessed with the state of the natural world at all. So I think in that whole process, I was looking for something to do, and it had to check a few boxes. It had to be kind of a little bit wild and adventurous, like my previous 3 years had been. It had to have an important cause, and it had to be about nature. And then I'd spent a good percentage of my childhood growing up in and around Gansbaai. So obviously, once I got back there, I had a look around, and there were two very prominent things. One was abalone poaching, and the other
Mm.
one was, and I had served in APU units, anti-poaching units, now internationally for the last 3 years or so. And the other one was the white sharks that I had. I'd assumed by the time I got back, these sharks would be back in full swing in their normal population size.
Wow.
But when I got back and I realized there was still a mess, it just started fascinating me. I wanted to know why, and I think everybody wanted to know why. Nobody was sure.
Wow.
And that's how we started the whole story. Actually, I didn't want to make a movie about it. I wanted to do what I do best, do some extreme nature challenge, something really wild that people would be shocked by, and then use it to raise awareness to the plight of
Yeah.
the ecosystem. So that's what I decided on. So I looked at Dyer Island, and I'm like, I grew up within walking distance of this island. I spent right on the water. I spent a lot of time next to these waters. This is, I think, the craziest thing a human can do is to swim to this island and back. I almost cannot even fathom it, but now is the time to do it if you're ever going to do it. Uh, and then I knew it would be a
It's like you heard it, everyone. Go swim to Dyer Island.
yeah, I thought it would be a bit like a monk setting himself on fire, you know. But anyway, then then I thought, okay, the more I thought about it, the more I thought this was a really good idea given the moment in time at the moment. Mm, so then I thought to myself, hang on, why don't we just document this? And that's where the documentary started. And then um
Well, then, yeah,
once
at what point did you start thinking, okay, now we got to interview? I mean, you interviewed so many heavy hitters. Like, I mean, that's a
yeah,
long conversation, but like,
yeah.
so just to shorten it, like, at what point did you realize, okay, wait a minute, it can't just be about documenting the swim. We've got to interview Andriotti, Hartman, Kim Shark Lady, like all these people. How did
Yeah,
that happen?
to be honest with you, it started fascinating me, and I started really wanting to know why the sharks are gone. And initially, like a lot of other people, I thought it was all man-made contributing factors. And so I wanted to get to the bottom of that, not because I needed to, because, yeah, one, it fascinated me. Look, I grew up there. Like every time I went into that water, there was always the white shark was always in your consciousness because there were so many of them. So in Gansbaai, when you go into the water, you think white shark. You have to be a
Hmm.
little bit more wary than other spots. Be careful of swimming by yourself around sunset. When you're surfing there on those desolated beaches where there's no one around, you're thinking shark because they are there.
Sure.
You're very close to the island. You have to be just like if you're walking through a piece of bush with elephant. Elephant can be harmless in most occasions, but you have to consider the elephant, and that was what the white shark was like to me. So it had played a big role in my growing up.
Mhm.
So and then when I started scratching around, I saw things that most other people didn't know. Like there was some very interesting history books about Dyer Island and it just fascinated me how we treated the shark, especially the early inhabitants of Dyer Island, how they had called these sharks. And how many sharks there were
Hmm.
back then. And now suddenly, for the first time ever that we know of, there just aren't any sharks around. And the more I scratched, the more interesting it became. And back then, most people didn't know for sure what had happened to the sharks. So it was kind of an investigative journey. And the craziest thing is all these scientists just agreed to speak to me on camera, which I found kind of strange, but that was great. And so, yeah, we started interviewing them, and we saw many different theories and angles on what was busy happening and what was the case. But again, we chose to focus on the shark nets. Now, I grew up in a scientific home. I'm all for science. I know the different variables and the different contributing factors why we're sitting with conservation problems worldwide. But we decided the most interesting story was the shark nets. And I think, Charlie, you could have actually spent an hour and 20 minutes just making a documentary just purely on the sharks board. Yeah, we had to focus. So that's how the documentary started. Frankie and Margot put up their hands. They were looking for projects to work on, and they came through.
Now, my question is, out
Yeah.
of all the people you interviewed, the one that shocked me the most, where I'm just like, how in the hell did they get this interview, was Jeremy Cliff. And for those that haven't seen the movie yet, Jeremy Cliff he worked with the Shark Boards as one of their head scientists for decades. The last person in the world you would ever think would agree to talk about, honestly, shark nets. And to me, I got to tell you, to me, he's the hero of the movie, honestly. He anchors the entire thing, I feel like, because in almost every conservation movie I've had, people have asked me, why don't you ever interview the opposition? And my answer is they've been talking by controlling the narrative with money and influence, in other movies I've made for decades. We already know their perspective, which is it's okay to cut down the forest because we need it to make these products and it renders moot the environmental argument. But when Jeremy Cliff is on screen saying things like, it's a killing device, it's a fishing device, it's designed to capture and kill sharks, I was just like, I remember the first time I read the footage, I was like, wait, Frankie, did he really just say that? So can you just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's why I say it kind of surprised me that everybody just was willing to talk to me. It was almost surreal, and when he agreed so quickly and easily to talk to us, it was even better. It was even more surreal. And I think he kind of, yeah, he was unapologetic and very, very precise about his answers in the fact that, yeah, that they were literally busy cutting sharks with the imperfect system.
Hmm.
The Sharks Board maintains that their system is a necessary evil in order to protect, surprise, surprise, human income and human jobs. And that without them, this portion of the coast won't have the great stability and the wealth that it would have without them. Then, in order to justify their need for existence, they prop up the dangers that shark pose. So when you walk into the shark spot in Umhlanga, which by the way is a very expensive area, so I'm not sure what their rental fees are or whether they purchased it outright in cash. But I, for one, thought, wow, you guys don't need this expensive real estate to be doing the job you're doing. I'm not sure why you're based here out of all places. But in any case, when you walk in, you see these surfboards with chunks bitten out of it, and these big jaws and these big scary articles of man-eater sharks, and you very quickly you get the picture that the Sharks board is a autonomous organization, and they have no intention to cease existing. So in order for them to continue existing, they have to justify why they are around. And they have been doing that with a lot of passion and dedication for the last couple of decades. Can you blame them? I don't know. It's people who have a job who want to continue doing their job. And I think, like many of us in the corporate world, they justify doing what they're doing to feed their families and to create jobs and in a
Hmm.
country large unemployment and so on and so on. I think like you guys or like we indicated in the movie, the goal should never be to take people out of employment. The
Mm.
goal maybe should be for the Sharks board to pivot into a new space, be fluid like water, like Bruce Lee said we should, and pivot into a new space.
Yeah.
Um, or face, if you're slow to move, there may come a day when the government comes knocking on your door and says, "Hey guys, by the way, we no longer need you." So I for one, and I think many other people hope that they'll do the smart thing, but also the right thing, and they'll try and pivot into a new space. But knowing human nature, you know, uh, I'm not too optimistic that that is going to happen without some form of hardship or um, somebody ordering them to change from the top. But it's definitely something I would love to see
Yeah.
happen. Yeah,
I mean, that is something that was unique with other movies I've made and other projects I've worked on. It was definitely a thing where like the only solution was the company had to lose a ton of money and stop what they were doing in order to protect the environment. And I was actually pretty excited through the process of going through the interviews and realizing like this is one of the rare situations where there actually is a solution where everyone keeps their job. Like there's really good
yeah,
practical solutions where everyone who works for the Sharks board gets to keep their job, you know, and maybe even hire more people, you know, with some of the
yeah,
ideas that Bruce had and Rory. I mean, there's just really good solutions. It's, you
yeah,
know, so hopefully that happens. But I mean,
yeah,
I think as long as we're locked in as humans, as long as we're locked into us and them thinking, it's going to be so hard to find solutions. As long as you have this dichotomy, these humans are against these humans, and in between, all the species are dying, right? Us versus them thinking just doesn't really work that well. And so that's what I really like about this movie is out of all the movies I've worked on, I feel like this is the one where it's such an easy solution. Um,
yeah.
no one has to lose out. So hopefully that happens. But
Look, there are ways for an organization like this. Let's begin by defining what is your reason for existing. Why do you exist? It is to provide some kind of safety to a beach-going economy
mhm,
for the consumer who it serves.
right.
That's why they exist.
That's
End
what
of
it
story.
is. Yeah.
Stop. You don't have to pretend to be a scientific contributor or a science-based organization or anything like that. This is why you exist. End of story. So if that is your criteria for existing, in which other ways can you contribute to have even more impact serving the exact same goal? There are other ways. For example, like I said before, the crime is a big problem, especially in KwaZulu-Natal. It's one of the most violent states or provinces, as we say, in the country. Crime is a big, big issue, and crime is one of the top reasons listed by tourists when they voice skepticism about visiting not only South Africa, but Africa, but certainly South Africa, because we are right up there with the best when it comes to crime, like Mexico and so on,
Yeah.
Venezuela, Honduras, and so on. So that is something that can be addressed by an organization like this, because a lot of your tourists are skeptical about visiting your beach town resorts because of crime. So what are you doing about those things? Because they are a much bigger problem than a spike of a small number of shark fatalities in the 60s and the 50s, you know?
Hmm.
Um, this is actually a much bigger problem. So you could use the same amount of budget, the same amount of funding, and you could address those issues
Yeah.
um, with more success.
Yeah.
And that's something that I would look. I've spent a lot of time in the ocean. I've spent time in rivers that have crocodiles in them. I've spent time in rivers with hippos. I've spent time around elephants, lions. I've talked the talk and walked the walk. And let me tell you something. I've also dealt with violent syndicates, and the number one thing I would have addressed from a security point of view, if I was concerned about human well-being or life, is I would have addressed the criminal element, because that's a much bigger problem. It causes more damage to property. It causes more damage to humans. It has a bad reputation in the tourism industry. It gives us paints us in a very bad picture internationally. So that is the kind of thing I would have chosen to address first and foremost.
Yeah.
I would have focused using the private sector to make beachfront and beach going areas and safer for tourists and for visitors. And I personally think you would get much higher return on your investment doing that with
Yeah.
an actual impact, as opposed to, yeah, Charlie, how many people have been killed by white sharks in the history of humankind? Do you know that number?
I don't.
It's it's somewhere in the 60s, and throughout all history, all documentation, 60 people, for God's sake. Like,
Yeah.
how many people do hippos kill each year? How many people do mosquitoes? Mosquitoes, how many people do suicides kill, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And you're talking about 60 in the in the complete history of this planet, as far back as we remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is not a threat that deserves this kind of budget, this kind of focus. Uh, there are other bigger problems that we can address with that budget, while at the same time giving protection to an animal who we have classified as protected. Nobody came to us and forced us to do that. We made that decision. So now we made that decision. Now we gotta run through with enforcing those laws, because we came up with that idea. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
mind-boggling
Yeah.
actually. There's
Yeah.
so much to do in this country. There's so many ways to spend a budget to make things better and safer, and that's the way we choose to do it, with absolute non-threat. It's mind-boggling.
That's a really good point. Well, just to wrap it up so we don't give people a video that's too long to listen to, or hopefully people can use this like a podcast, listen to it on their way to work or something. But so it's coming out on channel 115. And again, me being from South Africa, I don't know how all that works, but you're saying everyone there will know what channel 115 is, because I guess, see, here in the States, most people don't even watch like TV anymore. Most people just watch like Netflix, or they'll like use an app like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon to like get their entertainment. But anyway, my question to you is, do you think a lot of people will tune in and watch it? Do you think this is something that the the person on, general citizen in South Africa will be like, a movie about the sharks. I'm interested in that.
My answer, unfortunately, is absolutely no. Uh, the average citizen here grows up in a township in a rural area. He's likely never been to the sea. That's your rural African person. So they definitely won't be interested. They will be petrified of sharks. I can tell you that much.
Wow.
Um, it will reach people with an interest in conservation and people with an interest in the ocean, maybe surfers and these kind of people. Now, our hope has always been that we can influence somebody that at some point is going to have some kind of impact on legislation. Some sane mind out there is going to consume this content or pass it on or have their kids watch it, and their kids are going to turn out to be ministers in parliament or
Right.
influencers in some other capacity. And I think that's a realistic goal. I think you know what, Charlie, my game is a bit different from yours. I walk around assault rifle and a K9. But I think the power of the camera it exceeds all else. It used to be the pen, now I think it's the camera.
The camera
And
is mightier
so
than the sword.
the camera is mightier than the sword. So
Yeah.
we've been
Uh,
chatting in recent months. There's so many interesting stories one can tell, but hopefully this is a story that gets to the right ears and the right viewer,
yeah.
and that person has some kind of impact going forward. But I personally think you guys did great with a product, and yeah, I have a lot of people that are coming up to me and saying, "Wow, we appreciate what you guys did, and thank you so much for shedding some light on some of these things. We had no idea that this is how it works." A lot of the people, when they see for the first time about shark nets, including myself, when I saw the details, the facts about shark nets, even though I'd grown up in places with a lot of sharks and with some form of shark net, I never realized how they work. And
Mm.
I never realized that they were basically culling machines and not separation barriers. And it's strange. A lot of people come up to me and say, "Wow, we didn't realize this is how it worked."
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, so it's changing people's minds and all, and that's a good thing.
That's cool. That's very cool. All right. I just want to ask you one last question. What work, can you just speak very briefly about the work you were just doing and what work you're about to go start doing? Because people ask like, what's Devet doing now and everything. So,
Yeah, so it was kind of crazy. My last couple of months was one of the craziest like assignments I've ever had. And bear in mind, before that, it was pretty whack as well. Uh, but yeah, I spent a couple of months now protecting abalone, and abalone is like a sea snail, and the same as all the other, not all, the majority of the wildlife that's being trafficked that we personally, that I've had a hand in protecting. It's the same formula. China overfished their own stocks because of a population that's unsustainably big. And then they start scratching around in the rest of the world to find that animal that they've pushed into extinction. They're a local variant of that species. So
wow.
hence they find the Totwaba in Mexico, they find the abalone in South Africa and a few other parts. Because of the massive demand, that stock is overfished, especially in poorly regulated parts of the world. Once it's overfished, the supply goes down, the demand goes up, the price for it goes up, and hence we have abalone poaching in South Africa. It is worth a lot of money, and we have syndicates, and I'm telling you, I've never seen something like this in my life, where we have syndicates like gangsters operating in clear sight during daylight hours as well as hidden in the dark, um, poaching these snails, and you have to escort a truck with I'm talking about truck. It's a tiny truck with dried abalone with assault rifles and bulletproofs in multiple vehicles to make sure that the truck doesn't get robbed on its way to the airport
Oh my
where the
gosh.
shipment is being sent to China. So yeah, we
Wow.
were crawling around in wilderness areas, even in complete darkness with thermal
Fleur.
binocular vision,
Yeah.
FLIR and thermal, and it would just look like cockroaches to the left and the right. You just see four guys half immersed in water there. You see 10 guys crawling there. You see all different syndicates. You see two guys running there. Just alive all around you, almost like cockroaches, all going for this abalone and
Wow.
facing imprisonment. And of course, yeah, we had fist fights. We had knife fights. We had full speed car chases where we would try and pull over a transporter, and the syndicate leader would come past in a souped up Audi and try and push us off the road. Crazy stuff for a for a sea snail. So yeah, that's what I was doing.
Wow.
What I was doing now, yeah, and the syndicates would offer money for your address. They offer money. They put a
Wow.
price on your head once you've been involved in a number of scuffles. They find out where your kids go to school. So I stayed in barracks,
Wow.
and
That's
it's obviously
crazy.
guarded and protected.
And so
And
now, and so now you're transitioning to go back to the Bushveld with your trusty dog.
yeah, so I came from the bush. I always wanted to do the abalone thing, and again because I grew up, we grew up diving for abalone. And to be honest with you, I love the action and the adrenaline. I'm very much like they say, a bush baby. I like the bush. I like the elephants. I like the lions. So I'm on my way back to the bush now. I can't say too much at this stage,
Sure.
but it looks like I'm going to be blessed to look after a reasonable sized reserve, and then moving around between different areas, hopefully internationally as well with this company. So,
So it's
uh,
anti-poaching work though, again?
oh yeah, it's again rhino. We're
Okay.
gonna be protecting rhino, and there's about 2,000 farmed rhino that was bought over by Peace Parks within the last year, and they're going to be reintroduced to parks all over the country. So there's going to be a new drive to reestablish rhino populations,
Wow.
including in Mozambique. And I believe even the Congo may again benefit. And then, of course, the white rhino is doing okay. It's been doing okay for a number of decades. When I say okay, I mean it's no, by compared to the black rhino, it's doing okay. It's still not doing okay compared to other animals, but it's a constant battle for its survival. It's a little bit like warfare. It's based
Yeah.
on small teams, special forces tactics, the way they protected guys in camo, assault rifles, moving around in unpredictable patrols. Um,
You know,
so yeah,
it's really interesting. I think this is a cool point to close on. Like as you're saying all this, it also just makes me realize again, like ultimately the shark sport issue is an anti-poaching issue. It's a protected animal that's being actively poached by a government entity. I mean, that just has to stop. It's just it's
that,
crazy.
that is a good point you raising. And I think we mentioned this in the movie, and
It
that's
is.
the most interesting point is that yes, you're 100% right. Here you have abalone poaching syndicates. They are organized crime units. They are dangerous. They use the threat of violence, and they are violent. You have insurgency groups coming across borders with AK-47, sometimes with helicopters, hit and run on the rhino extract. Same
Wow.
thing with ivory, and then hop over to the marine world. Here you have an endangered animal being killed, not by these organized crime units. No, it's by the government who decided that this animal was protected itself. You know,
It would
it's
almost be
really
like it would almost be like if the government started actively ensnaring and capturing rhinos. It's a protected animal, and the humans decided they were super dangerous, and so they just started killing rhinos and put up a rhino net that the rhinos would get trapped in and die and starve.
that would be the exact equivalent. And we're saying on the land, this is where the land and the sea differs. On the land, you'd never see net systems like these nets being implemented because it would leave so many carcasses for everybody to see visibly on the land, and people would be in and it would be an outcry, you know. But the sea is
Hmm.
very different because all these things are hidden from
Yeah,
humans.
right, right.
But
Wow.
we're saying on the land we've transitioned. Lions are scary. Elephants are scary. Trust me, I know because I've smelt them from close up. That's how close I've been. They are scary and dangerous animals. End of story. But from a tourism point of view, they are fascinating. And even myself, I love walking into a Pride of Lions. There's nothing like it, you know. There's a tourism value to that. And that is something that's sustainable for both parties. It means we have an economy that can benefit from it. Or we can draw people from all over the world. And that's exactly what Dyer Island did. It
Right.
drew Brad Pitt,
I was just thinking that. Yeah. Same.
variety of other celebrities. That is the only way forward where everybody wins. We need
Yeah.
to relook at our systems. Those are the only places where it works, and we need to relook at definitely at
Yeah.
this system.
Yeah. All right. All right. We don't want to make people listen for too long, so I think I'm going to stop it there. But thanks a lot for your time, Devet.